Good evening. Welcome to the March 11th, 2020 meeting of the Finance Committee. Tonight, our agenda includes one transfer and a review of budgets, the town clerk and election budgets, and the Department of Public Works budgets. So why don't we have our town clerk? Come on up, Ms. Gramo. Nice to see you. Thank you for coming in. Do you have any highlights for us or things you want to tell us about the budget?
I mean, the budget itself is pretty much the same, other than, you want to start with the clerk or elections?
Clerk, please.
So the clerk budget is pretty much the same as last year. I have Sarah going to the 3-year program, so that increased just because last year she got a scholarship, so this year, we're paying for it. And under dues, I have included her in the IMC membership dues so that when she graduates, she'll be able to get her certification if she gets the points. But other than that, for the most part, everything is pretty much the same on the clerk side.
Okay.
Madam Chair, just a reminder, we walked in a revision tonight, so what you have in your book is different than what was provided to you tonight. So I just want to make sure you're looking at the correct one.
Make sure you have the one that says revised. Okay. I have a question about the school. Does the assistant town clerk stay over there to go to the school? Is it just?
It's a week-long program. Last year, she went up on Saturday, comes back on Friday. This year, I think they go up on Sunday and comes back on Friday. So it is a week-long at a college, living dorm style.
But, so that includes the room and board there and everything?
Yes, it does.
Right? Okay.
Yes, that's the whole program for year 2. And then next year, year 3. Will be her graduation year from that.
Sometimes you have an article for maintenance or books of the old.
That's CIP, the CIP.
I mean, it's in CIP this year?
It is.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that amount is sufficient?
Yeah, at this point, I think so. We kind of, look at that year to year, and whichever needs, rebinding or redone. What goes first.
All right. Are you under an obligation by the state to maintain those?
Some of the very old records, yeah, we have to maintain paper. For the clerk, we do have to keep the paper copy, especially for the very old ones. And the ones that we've been working on are from 1700s going up. So the newer ones aren't going to need to be done. And if at some point, if we have to want to digitalize them, but the old ones, we have to keep it preserved.
How she looked at me when she said if we have the money.
I noticed that.
I'm not looking that way anymore.
I wonder if that's a project for a college student or some sort of internship program or something.
Yeah, I think it has to be done a certain way. We just went through that whole King information system that went through the entire vault, the 3rd floor, categorized all the records. Yep. We were able to purge what we could purge. The next step would be if we could digitalize them, but it has to be a certain way to have them digitalized. So somebody can't just scan them and do them, because Eddie and I asked. All right. Because it would have been easier, but it's a certain way. And I'm constantly getting phone calls from people. Is this the year that you're going to digitalize? And I'm like, I don't think there's money in the budget. So we're trying to get through. We did all the records. Now we're working on the mapping part of it. So the maps between upstairs. Well, most of ZBA and planning are down in the vault, but a lot of the building, and they also have a lot of ZBA ones up there, but ours are the original one. So we've been categorizing those, and they've started that project, and I just have probably just under $3,000 to finish the vault part of the mapping program. And then we're going to go upstairs and work on that.
It's a lot of records.
It is.
Well, Madam Chair, just to let you and the other members know, Deb did submit a warrant article for the annual town meeting to finish that mapping aspect. We're going to postpone that till the fall, given the fact that we're not able to make recommendations just for the operational side of the budget right now. So it's going to be in competition with some departments that weren't able to get what they requested. That being said, I think it's a good item that we may consider under free cash, or we may consider if the revenue situation becomes improved. And certainly, we're not going to know that until well after the annual town meeting. So there may be an additional article above and beyond the CIP that addresses that record management aspect.
Okay, thank you. So any questions? I have a question regarding the salary line. That looks to be the only difference between the town manager recommendation and the department request. So department request is $79,000, town manager recommends $76,732. Can you talk to where the $79,000?
I had requested $79,000 based on a salary survey through clerks of the 13 towns that typically survey, and came out with, I don't know if you have a copy of that, but I could, do they have a copy of that?
No, I think that was for-
Probably not, but you could look at that, because I did bring it. Anyways, it was based on 13 towns that we typically survey. Out of the 13 towns, it's about even. There's maybe 7 appointed versus 6 elected. Appointed needs specific requirements to get an appointment. Elected, you only need to be a registered voter living in town and run on the ballot. Elected clerks are paid less than appointed, so I had requested an increase based on the salary, and I felt that it was a pretty, conservative amount.
So just to let you know, and that's why we came in with a revision. So the original recommendation was consistent with other bylaw employees at 3%, actually 2% with a 1 in reserve based upon successful evaluation. Unlike the bylaw employees, we have an elected official here, so we only have 1 crack at this, and this is at the annual town meeting. So that's what makes it somewhat problematic, because we would have done a review, although we wouldn't have been able to make that recommendation after the annual town meeting.
Right.
So through a combination of things, we were able to get close to what Deb's request was. So in addition to the 5% here, there's an increase in the election side on the registrars, because she oversees the registrars, and most clerks, a lot of the clerks in that survey that she just distributed to get an annual stipend of $2,000. Deb was only getting $800, so we're going to recommend an additional $1,000 that gets her closer to the 2 consistent.
Under the Mass General Law.
So that gets her, the combination of those things gets her closer to her request.
So this is, based on the 2,000 on the Mass General.
So, right, there's a Mass General Law that allows for compensation.
All right, so any questions? Okay, I'm going to read the town manager recommendation to see if there's a motion to recommend. The town manager recommendation is $184,294, and the department request is $186,562. So the department request is 5.84% larger than last year, or fiscal '20, and the town manager recommendation is 4.55% higher. Do I hear a motion to recommend the town manager's recommendation?
Motion to recommend.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Thank you. And now we'll look at elections. So I see we have 3 elections.
3 elections.
So May, September, and
General election.
in November. Right? Okay. So So the town manager recommendation on the elections budget is $33,594. That includes a $9,109 increase, or 37.2% increase over last year. Any questions? Do I hear a motion to recommend the town manager recommendation?
Motion to recommend.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you, Dan.
Capital, Madam Chair?
Right, I see just the books are there, correct? In your capital line?
Oh, yep. Just,
I haven't had Deb. Also want to inform you that we have a revised capital that was brought in tonight as well. There was one change as a result of a request we got through Cable Access that wanted to prioritize a project that was earmarked later in the CIP.
Yep.
From 2024 to next year. That money is coming out of retained earnings, so it really had no impact on the level of taxation used to fund this 5-year capital plan. So I just want to identify that there's a new packet before you tonight.
Okay. So I see the request is in the CIP is pretty much $10,000 each year, and that's to book and map repairs. Good. I'm glad to see that, because I'm sure that we have so many old, again, we just talked about it, but it's nice to see they're being maintained.
I'd love to give you a tour of the vault to see what it looked like before and after. It looks wonderful now.
All right. I think I definitely need to see before, right? And then, all right. Any questions on the CIP? No. All right. I think we're all set then. Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you. All right.
All right. So, time for Mr. Boyle.
Heavy hitters.
Here he is, Mr.
Want to bring your crew up? And
If they have questions that I can't answer, we'll bring them up. I'll be okay.
So,
is Kenny presenting first?
So, Madam Chair, if I could
Yes.
introduce the DPW staff that's here.
Yep.
Joanna Paquin. Joanna has been recently promoted to the Assistant DPW Director and Sewer Superintendent due to Jeff Mitchell's retirement. And we also have Ken Fairbanks, the Highway Parks Cemetery Superintendent as well.
okay, great. Thank you. Thank you. So, do you want to talk to us about the budget? Give us some highlights.
Sure. I think probably the two main things that have changed, if you look at the highway and parks wages, you'll notice that the highway increase, it was actually a decrease in wages, and the parks was an increase, and that was as a result of one of our employees that we hired recently. The intent was that person was going to work half-time in highway and half-time in parks. What we're finding is that his time was desperately needed in the Parks Department, so he was predominantly in parks, probably 99% of the time. And so what we felt as though it would be an appropriate time to shift the wages from the highway, a portion of highway, to fully into the Parks Department. And then further down towards the end of the budget, I can talk a little bit about the sewer, the Blackstone assessment. That has increased by 11%.
Wow.
So I can talk a little bit about that when we get that too as well. But those are probably the two most noteworthy items.
Okay, so let's just look at the first, I guess, sub-budget. It's the Department of Engineer. The department requests $692,636, and that matches the town manager recommendation. Okay, do we have any questions on that line? Or on that budget? Continuing down, ask question anytime. We're looking at stormwater. The department requests $379,516, which is the same as the town manager recommendation.
Madam Chair, if I could add on this particular budget, just to bring the board up to speed where we are with hiring a new engineer. So upon Jeff's retirement, we had already been advertising for a new engineer for the stormwater position. Unfortunately, we had gone out 3 times and was unsuccessful in getting an engineer, I think based on the salary being too low. So when Mr. Mitchell retired, we then shifted our gears to, with Joanna replacing him, to having an engineer replace Joanna's position. We were successful in hiring an engineer about 3 to 4 weeks ago. We're very fortunate. She's a great engineer. We're lucky to get her, but we continue to search for more of a entry-level position. So the civil engineer that's shown in the stormwater budget has been increased from 60 to 70 only because we didn't have really any applicants at the 60,000.
Yep.
So.
And that's for the full-time position, correct?
Yes, yes.
Okay. I know that last year, in the fall, $200,000 was put into stormwater management. Do you anticipate any articles on this warrant coming up for money outside of what's here?
It's something certainly that we may be discussing with town management. We, on a regular basis, are evaluating the stormwater system and where we are with our EPA permit. I know other communities have created, separate stormwater fee that they're charging in our enterprise fund. In adjacent community, I think they're at 1.2 million a year. So certainly we're trying to look at our budget and look at our needs and assess it as we go. The new engineer that we just hired has very strong background in stormwater to review our permit, to try to make sure that we are where we need to be with the permitting. I can tell you, though, that, as I mentioned before, the infrastructure itself is deteriorated, and I can see a large percentage of the $200,000 that was approved just in the Barbara Ave neighborhood alone being spent in that area, replacing drainage pipes and catch basins. So if funding was available, certainly it would be something that we could certainly use going forward, but I know that each year the budget is tight, so it's something that I've been discussing with town manager and the CFO. So.
Okay.
As the needs arise, though. So.
Yeah, Madam Chair, no doubt that we recognize this as a priority. Certainly, ultimately, we like to infuse $200,000 into the annual operating budget. We were able to do it through a vote out of free cash at the fall town meeting, and certainly that will carry Bill into the future somewhat, but certainly it's not going to take long to burn through that.
Right.
So we have to come up with a plan to add some money, whether it's incrementally over the next several years into stormwater, that deals with the ongoing replacement issue of stormwater infrastructure.
Thank you. Any questions? Okay.
I have a question about the engineer salary. The senior civil engineer, I think, only makes like $1 more a week. Is that a role that we need to reassess also?
Well, the reason for that, when we went out for a senior civil engineer, we'd advertised that position for $70,000 to $80,000. So the applicant that we had chosen had approached us for working a 4-day schedule, so it's 30 hours. So it worked for us because our budget allowed to be able to pay a higher hourly rate to be able to get this person to come to the town. So the annual salary, that's a good point. That's why it's showing that it's not much more, because it's based on the number of hours per week.
That makes a lot of sense.
Thank you.
A question about Chapter 90 funds. Do you expect them to be the same?
We're hoping, from what I'm seeing, that there's an article, it's called an article, a bill before the State House for a potential increase of another $100 million. We don't know if that's going to pass. If that did pass, we would potentially get an additional $300,000 per year. So I know I went to a seminar yesterday where they talked about an infusion of $100 million per year and this was presented by Mass DOT, but I believe they were looking at that 100 million going more towards state-numbered routes, which are not necessarily state highways, versus Chapter 90. I think the communities obviously would rather see it as Chapter 90 money. So I think there's several bills that are before the State House currently, so we're not sure if that's going to move forward or not, but that would be great if it did.
And what did we get last year for
About
this year, 2020?
About 612,000.
So 300,000 would be a big increase, 50%.
Would be very helpful.
And I know we've been increasing money, adding as much as we can each year into that line. Okay.
Right, through the roadway reconstruction, the 535,000 in the budget has allowed us to do about 4 to 4.5 miles of roads per year. And the town has about 92, 94 miles of roadway. So our goal is to have all the roads, the initial goal is 20 years, but I think we're more into a 22-year, 23-year time frame to have all the roads completely done. And I believe the last time I was here, at one of the previous meetings, we reported back that we had about 40% of the roads in town had been reconstructed or resurfaced to date. So we're moving along on that target.
Good. All right, so any other questions? No? Looking at the next budget, the Department of Public Works, a long budget. Let's see, the department request is $1,384,556, and which matches the town manager recommendation. That is reduced by $6,149 from fiscal 20, or a 0.44% decrease. Any questions?
One through the chair. For the stormwater public education line item, can you elaborate on what that is? It's level funded again for this year.
I'm sorry, which line?
Public education, it's under stormwater.
Back in stormwater?
Yeah, so
Which one, I'm sorry?
public education, second up from the
education.
bottom. Just what that includes
That's
and.
more for public outreach. As part of our EPA permit, we're required to have a public education component. So whether it's preparing flyers and mailing out, doing mailings, we can also do outreach through social media, through newspapers. So it's just, that item is carried for public outreach. So at this point, having an engineer that's specialized in stormwater, we'll see where this number goes, whether or not she feels as though just going forward, we don't need 2,500, or if we need more than 2,500, so.
Do you know what we've used in 2020 to date from that? Or?
I don't know offhand.
Yeah, I don't have a status report with me, but
Okay, thank you.
How many employees are there at the highway department now?
In highway, 12 employees in highway.
And then how about the rest of the
I
departments?
think we're total full-time employees, we're upwards around 34.
Okay.
Between highway, parks, cemetery, sewer, golf course, engineering, and stormwater fleet and facilities.
Okay. Do you have any openings besides the,
We've had one person out on workman's comp for a year, but there's no current vacancies beyond that.
Do you anticipate needing to backfill the position that was moved over to Parks?
I think we're gonna monitor that to see how we do in the next year, because it was, when we came before the board, it was a position that we were hoping to share. So I think we'll see how it goes this coming year. It's a little hard to say because we were shorthanded last year with the person who was out on workman's comp. So it really depends on if that person comes back, we can see how we do. I mean, certainly, I can tell you in the highway department, you can always use more people. And any town could tell you that. You drive around and you look at your roads, there's unlimited amount of maintenance. Certainly, there's more crack sealing that we would like to do. So we have the sweepers going out now. Then we start working on rebuilding catch basins, berms, patching roads. And, there wasn't a lot of damage to the lawns this year because there wasn't a lot of snow or damage to the berm, but certainly there's always more we could do. I could keep 6 more people busy, but it's a balance between staff and obviously the cost of the staff.
Just given that one position out, is there enough in the overtime account? So I notice it's a bit lower than the 3-year average, 80,000 versus the average of 97,377. And I would think with someone out, the
Highway overtime?
did I get ahead?
Snow and ice.
Oh, snow and ice.
Oh, that's snow and ice.
Snow and ice, we're in good shape this year.
Okay.
There aren't too many years we can say that.
Right? It was a
I
good
can tell you
year.
right now, just to touch upon snow and ice.
Yeah.
We have our shed is full right now with salt. There's probably about $60,000 to $70,000 worth of salt in the shed that we haven't used, and we still have additional funding available left in that budget. We hope to close out, probably, knock on wood, that we don't have any snowstorms or major events, certainly in the black this year, and hopefully by a fair amount. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, but winter's not over yet.
I know,
so
yeah.
If we have an April Fool's storm with 3 feet of snow, then all bets are off.
When was the last time we were in the black at this?
I don't know if we ever were.
Yes, that's amazing.
And we kept adding to snow and ice to address the need to come back every year to the reserve account or to try to identify funds within the department to offset deficits. So this is a unique situation. Hopefully, I don't want to jinx where we are now, but things are looking good. We hope, like Bill said, to finish in the black.
Excellent.
I'm assuming that plays in with it's like almost $160,000 less in next year's appropriation for salt, calcium.
I think you're looking, are you looking at the 3-year average?
Okay, yeah, I'm looking at a 3-year average
Yeah,
of 315, and we're down to,
Right, so we went up from the previous year, we budgeted 263, it looks, so that's what was spent.
We added to salt, I believe, the last couple of years.
Yeah, we did. We're trying to get closer to where we should be. Fortunately, this year, we still have funds available for additional salt that we haven't purchased, and I have a shed that I started out with about 200 tons, and right now I have probably a little over 1,000 tons of salt in the shed, which will put us in a good position next year, provided we don't get a lot of events between now and spring.
That's the plus side. Typically, we end the year, the shed is
Usually empty.
and then we have to expend a lot of money at the beginning of the fiscal year to load it up. Hopefully, if we can close out the year with it loaded up, we're out of the gate in good position for next year.
Good. Continuing, because of course we vote on just the total DPW budget, so we're looking at the individual departments as we go through. For the Facility Management Department, the department requests $79,850, and that matches the town manager recommendation. Under Fleet Maintenance, the department request is $204,891, and that also matches the town manager recommendation. Any questions on those? Yes, sir.
The one question I had was the motor vehicle repair budget went up by about $5,000. Yeah. And my only question was, I know that we had recommended or approved the purchase of the new lift, which was going to reduce the number of vehicle repairs that we had to ship out for. Right. Is that taken into account? I
can tell you that that's going to help, but I also know that the cost of all the parts have been going up over the past few years, and my fleet mechanic is telling me every year that, this year in particular, we came in for a transfer for 2 major repairs. So when we send some of these big trucks out on repairs that we can't do, those can be quite costly, because obviously most repairs we do in-house, but when it gets to be something that major, we send it out. So I don't think that I think we'll be over what was appropriated last year based on the transfers. So even though the lift is going to help offset the number and help keep that budget as low as possible, I think with the cost of all the parts going up every year, I don't think we're going to see a number below that. If anything, we have to keep all the vehicles maintained, and I know they do a great job doing it, but and it's this time of year, we can sometimes put off some of the equipment. So if we have one of our trucks that we use for plowing that breaks down, we may wait, if it's April, till after July to the next fiscal year. So far, that we're not in that situation, but sometimes that happens, and what that does is we start out in kind of a bad position in the next year because we're sending something out for $10,000 worth of repairs.
So so the $175,000 covers the cost for repairs to the DPW vehicles and any outside repairs for DPW vehicles. Does that also include the parts for the town vehicles that are?
Yes.
So that's a lot coming out of that.
It's all DPW vehicles, all police vehicles, and all the fire apparatus. There are some exceptions with some of the specialized fire equipment that we may send out, but they do service ambulances, they service every vehicle, and inspection services and town hall assessors as well.
Okay, thank you. Questions? All right, the next budget is the parks. The department requests $280,667, and that matches the town manager recommendation of $280,667. Do we have any questions on that budget? Looking at the next budget, Hackensack Golf Course, the department request is $365,951, and that matches the town manager recommendation. Any questions?
Just maybe maybe just a recap on how we did at the golf course this year in terms of revenue.
Actually, I think it was the past calendar year was our best calendar year. I think we were up around 430,000 for the year. The fiscal year
Was not our best year.
right, because we had rain in the spring. It was very wet beginning, and so I'm talking about the previous fiscal year. So if people recall, that not this past fall, but the fall prior to that was very wet, and I think we had a lot of revenues lost because there was no golf in October, November that year, and then in the spring, very wet, and really April and May had very limited golf. So for that fiscal year, FY19. That was probably our worst year, but when we look at this, we had a great start to last year, including the fiscal year, FY20, but the calendar year was excellent. We had a great year. We went up $1 per round of golf. It was the first time we've gone up since we took the golf course over, and that was our 4th year operating. So I thought that was pretty good, that even if you looked at the increase, it came out to roughly 2% per year for an increase, but then we came up to about $1 after 4 years.
And even though it was our worst year, we still turned a profit at year end. It was maybe $10,000, $15,000 versus 40 to 50 in the previous years. So, we know we're going to have years like that where the weather is not going to cooperate. It's going to take a bite out of net profit. But certainly we're going to have our banner years where conditions are favorable, and
retained earnings were well over 100,000, probably 140 or 150,000.
Oh, that's great.
yeah.
Just as an aside, more for this year, but given the, knock on wood, favorable weather we've been having, I'm assuming that the course will be opening.
Oh, we opened
on time,
Monday.
Or are we on par with, no pun intended, with the budget for this year?
Yes.
Assuming that, we're not getting any
we carried $10,000 in the contingency each year, and we haven't touched that 10,000 yet going forward. So I think we're in good shape.
Okay. Just not used to this kind of weather. So I just want to make sure we're...
No, we had to switch gears pretty quickly and get the golf course open with this beautiful weather.
Are the carts out?
Not yet, not yet.
Yeah.
A little wet, yeah.
Any other questions? Continuing on to the next budget, Recreation Department, Town Manager, Town Manager recommendation, $50,194 matches the department request of $50,194. So am I reading this, so 68%, how is this split, Ed? How is the revolving account?
So if you look at the salary for the rec director, it appears it's going down, but we're actually shifting more. We're generating profits in the recreation revolving account. And a lot of what the rec director does is program-related, activity and program-related, that generates revenues. At first, we wanted a trend that this was growing every year, and it has, and as a result, we're relying more on those revenues to offset some of her expense. So that's why we did a shift in her salary. We did more of an allocation on the revolving, and so there's 22% coming out of the revolving account, 10% coming out of the golf course, which she oversees on a day-to-day basis, and 68% coming out of tax levy.
Great. Is she a bylaw employee?
She's a bylaw employee, yes.
Any questions? The next budget to look at is the Cemetery Department. Department request $187,175, which is the same as the town manager recommendation. That's an increase of $1,634 from fiscal 2020.
Madam Chair, one comment. You're going to see a lot of what's being requested is being recommended by town manager. For the most part, they're just increasing their budgets by their fixed costs, their contractual obligations. If you look in E&S, for the most part, it's level funded. That's why you're seeing a mirror recommendation of town administration.
Okay. I understand. Thank you. Any questions? No. All right, and the last budget line is the Sewer Department. All right, I'll read, so fiscal 2020 appropriation is $5.7 million, and this year's department request is $5,895,151, and I see that the town manager recommendation is $5,885,893, which is a short difference, a small amount of difference. But we've increased it by 3.96%, this year's request from fiscal 2020. Can you talk about the, that's all mostly Upper Blackstone, huh?
Right, through the chair, if you look, we have a percentage of the tax levy increase is 2.73%. So the sewer budget, so the Upper Blackstone, and potentially the golf course, so that's also enterprise, both sewer and golf course. I think it's more the Upper Blackstone, because the Upper Blackstone assessment, what they charge us, went from 1.27 million to 1.41 million, based on their increased rates. It's partly due to additional flow coming from the town of Auburn to the Upper Blackstone, which could be partially from additional development that's occurred in town. Just for example, like Reliant Medical. I mean, certainly greater flow coming through Reliant Medical and some of these other, a lot of businesses being constructed. And so we have additional flow from businesses, but we also have what they look at is the previous 3 years of data to calculate our flow that they're going to base their billing for us on. And what I was talking about 2 years ago, we had the wettest year on record, or the second wettest year. So when we get a lot of rain, there's a lot more infiltration into the system of rainwater, so it's clean water, unfortunately, going to the Blackstone. So what we are doing is we just put out a contract to do flow monitoring in the sewer manholes to try to identify where there's more infiltration into our system so that we're able to go back in and seal any of those leaks that are coming into the system, because otherwise that's groundwater that might be coming in or rainwater. This was done several years ago. I think probably 8 to 10 years ago, I remember, the National Water Main was out sealing them, and that was very successful. And for a few years, we were close to being level funded with the assessment. There was actually one year it went down a little bit, but the past couple of years, it's been going up again. So their budget increased by 3%, the Upper Blackstone. So they then charge all the member communities based on a percentage of flow that we send to the sewer treatment plant. So, we were an 11% increase. Other towns, some towns were more. Town of Holden was over 15%. And then another town, I think it was in Rutland, was about 11%. They were about the same as us. And some of the communities were less. So we weren't the highest, but certainly we weren't the lowest either. Okay. And the only thing I'll add to that is when we talk about stormwater, the Upper Blackstone is in a similar situation where they have to comply with EPA permits because they ultimately discharge into the Blackstone River. So right now, there's been a lot of talk with EPA on what's going to be required for them to treat for phosphorus levels, and based on a certain amount of phosphorus that they can have entering into the Blackstone. And depending on how that plays out, there could be additional construction activity or improvements to the plant needed to meet those requirements. So, we don't know right now what that's going to be, but certainly the potential exists.
So we would have to absorb some capital costs, is that what you're saying, or it just gets folded into?
It would be built into the user's fee. So it wouldn't be, it's not going to be tax levy.
Right.
Because it's an enterprise. But certainly that's something we're watching. It's also something that we probably won't have any control over. If EPA mandates certain improvements, then the Upper Blackstone is going to have to move forward. They have tried challenging some of these things in court unsuccessfully, but I think it's something that's still moving forward.
Okay. Yes.
I know in some neighboring communities, the water companies have had some incentives to have homes replacing, toilets with lower volume flushes. Have we ever looked at anything like that in this town?
Not that I'm aware of. Certainly something we can consider. I could talk to Joanna about what things we could do for usage. It's a good point. I mean, there's other things that you can have incentives to try to have. Some people will have a sump pump discharging into their sewer system, which is they're not supposed to do that because now that's clean water that goes into the sewer line that we're treating. There are some talks about having different programs out there where people say, well, I can't afford to do the plumbing on that, but we are talking about it, so it's a good point. So we'll look into it further.
Because I just always find it odd, National Grid, that's still, they'll replace your shower head and that reduces your water, but it's not really related, but then, other water companies.
I do recall Jeff suggesting a low-cost solution by dropping a brick or two in your tank.
Oh, right.
Well, maybe.
Just don't drop it too high.
Yeah.
Don't drop it too high.
Yeah.
So do you anticipate sewer user fees increasing this year?
We haven't looked at that yet because I think the numbers just came to us. They just voted on this a couple of weeks ago.
Okay.
So now that we have their numbers, we can look forward to see where our budget is going to be at.
Okay.
And there are some other elements that come into play, such as borrowings, and there will be a warrant article on to address Bancroft Street replacement of a sewer line that runs under the bridge.
And the Route 20, we have two major projects.
Right, so, and all depending on when construction starts and cash flow to meet the duration of that project, all comes into the mix as to how the fee is set.
I was going to ask about the Pinrock Station project. What's the status? And that we voted to borrow, I believe, $2.2 million?
Right.
Okay.
Design is nearing completion, and so the only thing remaining, I believe, is to acquire the necessary right-of-way. The appraisals have been completed, and I believe they're approaching the property owners with a dollar value for the rights to enter upon their property. So if that goes through smoothly, we're hoping that we can advertise the project this spring and start construction late spring, early summer. A lot of it is going to be contingent upon acquiring the right-of-way.
Okay.
Just a question to the chair on that same topic. We had a limited time window, right, because of Route 20 and...
I think when it was first discussed, there was concerns with the state allowing us to do a road opening because there was other work ongoing with the, I think with the City of Worcester upgrades of their sewer line. But as it turns out, they didn't pave the entire area where we're going to be working. There may be a small patch, so I don't envision that being an issue. You know, it's more the work will be done at night, so it's probably a little more costly with night work. But yeah, I don't think that, Kevin, that window, I don't think exists anymore. I think it's just more of a patch that we'd be cutting across. So I think we'll be okay with Mass DOT. And again, this is just to create a redundant line. So in Pinrock, we have over 1 million gallons of sewage that runs through that station every day. Knock on wood, if we had a break, it would be very difficult for us to try to control all of the town's sewage. We have a plan in place on how we would do that, but it certainly wouldn't be easy and something that we don't want to see happen. By having this redundant line in place, one, the existing line is aging. It is probably approaching close to 50 years in age, 46, 47 years old. So obviously the older it gets, the greater the possibility of something happening with it. So this will create a redundant line. If that line did fail, we could switch over and we could use this as a permanent line at that point. Because obviously, if we have a break in the woods, in terms of how we mitigate that, we can run from manhole to manhole. With hoses going over land, obviously with Route 20, we can't do that.
All right. Questions? So you mentioned, well, we'll talk about warrant articles later, I think. So can you talk about, I know our previous chair always liked to hear what roads are kind of on the schedule for this year. If you're ready to mention that, or?
Yeah, I can try, and Joanna can let me know what I missed, but the entire Barber Ave neighborhood, we will actually, the contractor came to my office earlier this week, and he's ready to get going. Obviously, we've had some warm weather, so we were hoping to get out there this week to at least start looking at some of the drainage work that will need to be done, but we'll be starting in certainly by April 1st, I think. So that neighborhood, less one street, I was confused which one it is. Winchester is the newer one, or Westchester? Over where College, Winchester, yeah, one of them's in good condition.
Yep.
Only one of the streets in the neighborhood that we're not doing, and certainly anyone who lives in that neighborhood, they know which one there's a bad or not. But we're doing the entire neighborhood minus the one street, including sidewalks. We also have Rice in Overlook. We have a piece of, which is just off of Bancroft, very poor condition. We have Bancroft Street from Millbrae Street to the Turnpike Bridge, Wyomer and Hilltop Streets, and Cooper, is it Cooper? Off of Jerome. Any others, Joanna? Oh, and Jerome, we're milling and overlaying. Even though Jerome, again, that's one that we're trying to get to before it gets real bad. Because some of them we're pulverizing because they're so bad. Because we're in that area, Jerome is one that's starting to break up. And if we can mill it, we'll save some money by not needing to pulverize it. So it's more of a maintenance type project. Okay. And then we will be looking at what we're going to do when we get additional funding in July. So we're hoping that will continue with additional roads in the summer and fall.
With the Chapter 90 money, you mean?
Between Chapter 90 money and also the town's budget as well.
Okay.
We're hoping that we'll be able to do some more roads this year.
Okay, great. Any questions? Yep.
There's a lot of chatter these days about, some concern with people driving through town a little fast. I know we've had increased traffic. Have there been any areas identified for any kind of speed bumps or painting in the road that makes the road look raised or anything in terms of safety?
That came up last year. The speed bumps, typically they're from a highway standpoint are kind of frowned upon.
Yeah.
Well, because, emergency response, if you have speed bumps, ambulances would have to slow down. You don't typically see them on town roads. They can actually create a hazard. I believe in adjacent town, they did try it, and they removed them, that same year, because it had created some accidents. Motorcycles at night, in particular, would hit a speed bump. So even though we'd all love to have speed bumps in our neighborhoods, if you're driving, trying to get from point A to point B, everyone would find it frustrating if there were speed bumps on every road. But even more importantly, I think for public safety response vehicles. Then the other one that you kind of mentioned was the painting. I know someone had tried a two-dimensional painting that made it look three-dimensional. We had talked to Mass DOT about that last year, and it wasn't something that the Federal Highway Administration had supported at that time, so I don't think there's been any change on that. Speeding is always an issue, and certainly when we pave roads, people do drive faster. Unfortunately, the best thing for speed control is for when a road is in poor condition, people tend to drive slower. So it's kind of a catch-22. Everyone wants their roads paved, but then when you pave them, people drive faster, unfortunately. So, it becomes more of an enforcement issue, and it's because we do get calls for people that want speed limit signs and lower speed limit, and, there's a very lengthy process in determining what speed limit should be. So, unfortunately, there's no great solution to have people slow down. I'm sure, Kevin can reply to that too as a state trooper, sergeant.
Just kind of build on Mallory's question, and I don't know whose budget they fall under, but I see other communities that, there's doing some proactive stuff, the flashing speed limit signs, the radar signs. I know for us, our school department, school zones, I think those flashing 20-mile-an-hour ones have been there since, we were kids. Some of them are in disrepair. I don't know if that falls to the school department, if that is a town thing.
I think the replacement of those would go to, I'd like to say the school department. I know the school department would say it's on the town side. So we'd have to talk on what the needs were and where they need to be replaced with the school department and what their priorities would be.
I can only imagine. You probably, with some of those type of things nowadays, you can do solar versions, and I'm sure wiring and stuff below those have, had some issues over the years. But
yeah, we'd have to look at, because we did look at a solar version of the rapid flash and beacon for the pedestrian crossings. I haven't looked for school zones to see if they have those. I mean, you're right, they probably do. So that'd be probably a less expensive option. So, but it hasn't, the school department hasn't approached my department yet as to any area that they are looking to replace. And certainly, if that happens, we can work with them.
So I should help Mr. Fahey as well?
Yes, we've talked to Joe. We can have a meeting, a joint meeting with Joe.
Okay.
Split it.
Okay, any questions? When I read the sewer line, I read the wrong line. I read the total department line. The sewer actual department request is $2,260,457. So now we're going to vote on the total DPW line. The town manager recommendation, $5,885,893. That shows an increase of $233,589 over the current fiscal year 20, or a 3.96% increase. Do I hear a motion to recommend?
Motion to recommend.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
So let's take a look at the CIP now. We have fleet maintenance, engineering division. So we've got some drainage money in the CIP, I see.
Yes, Madam Chair, we've carried that every year. What I can say is, in FY '21, we're at $105,000. It's decreased to 55 because we've included the vac truck as sharing the cost with the sewer department, because we
see.
use that to clean catch basins as well, so we're splitting that with the sewer department.
Okay, great. And then looking at the highway division, I see we have $100,000 in roadway improvement also. So all that will will combine with the $500,000 plus in the budget and the Chapter 90.
Exactly. We tend to put out a bid for about $1.4 million per year. So obviously, we're getting a little over 600 from the state, so the town portion is 800,000 plus when you add up, you know, the stormwater money, the roadway reconstruction money, and the roadway improvement funds. And this last year, we had 150,000 towards parking lots. We included that in the bid as well, because we get better pricing. If we're lumping a $150,000 parking lot in with a $1.4 million contract, we get a much better value.
Okay. All right, we have the highway division and the sewer division, cemetery. This sewer line repair coming from retained earnings in the sewer department, that's just normal repair? Or does that go to a specific project?
It can. We're trying to identify, again, through the flow metering in the
Yeah.
manholes, if we can identify specific locations that in need of repair. That where we'd probably focus those funds on.
Okay, great.
And Madam Chair, I think we put an emphasis on that, especially when we had 2 sewer line breaks, that we had to raise $160,000 on the recap sheet because we didn't have the funds available. We would have to go back to town meeting and vote it out of retained earnings, or we did it as an emergency repair, as allowed under Chapter 31 to deficit spend and raises. So we had many discussions with DOR on how to treat that. Ultimately, it gets closed out to retain earnings. But in order to address any future breaks, we increase that account as a safety net in the event that should happen again.
Well, it makes sense. We have an aging system, so it makes sense. I mean, we've got to anticipate. Well, hopefully, like with this Pinrock project, we can catch something before it.
That's the major one, and then certainly we want to identify any other areas that are compromised.
How many towns have sewer flowing through Auburn to Blackstone?
Just the town of Oxford.
Just Oxford, okay.
And obviously, they pay a fee based on the usage.
Questions? One more question. You mentioned a fee, sort of an EPA fee, and I know you mentioned it last year, too, as some sort of thing. How would that work in a town?
It's something that we looked at about 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And we had done a study through a consultant when we knew the EPA permit was something that was still moving forward, Phase 2. And we actually brought that to the Board of Selectmen. I don't know, my memory, I don't remember if it went to Finance, if it got to that point, because I think when it went to the Board of Selectmen, the Selectmen vote was to not approve the enterprise and actually build it into the tax levy budget. And that's when I think we created the stormwater budget, and there's about $300,000 per year that goes into stormwater. So it was something we did try several years ago, and I think we were actually one of the first towns that were moving forward with trying to address what we saw, happening. So unfortunately, that was maybe not necessarily a good thing, because other towns have moved forward with it. They have passed it, and what they're doing is they're charging people based on the percent impervious area. So even a house, they were calling, in businesses, they were calling, every business had a certain amount of what they call a residential equivalent. So if you said each house has 3,000 square feet of impervious area, then you would take a business and divide their total impervious area by 3,000, and they'd have what they call residential equivalents, and they would pay that X number of times whatever the resident was paying. So it was going to be another fee that each resident had to pay, and I think the select board at the time felt as though it was something we should build into the budget.
Are you saying that the fee is based on the size of your driveway, basically? Or impervious?
It's based on an average size, so it wouldn't be, we wouldn't go out,
Right.
my recollection was they weren't going to go out and measure every single house.
Right.
It was based on an average. So a house might have, it's not square footage of your house, because you have more than one floor quite often. So you might have 3,000 square feet, it might have been 3,400, I forget the exact number. And then they were taking that number, and they would calculate each business, though, what they had for impervious, and divide that by the 3,000 or 3,400. And charge them for each unit, each residential equivalent.
And that would be tacked on to the sewer bill?
You could do it through the sewer department, or you could do it through a separate, through stormwater enterprise, right?
I think a lot of them bill either through a utility menu, or I think it's even allowed under a property tax.
I understand.
You bill at the same time you bill your property tax.
Right.
Thank you. Any questions? Think we're all set?
Madam Chair, we do, I don't know if you saw Cemetery and Parks. I know we stopped at sewer.
Oh, didn't we look at it? I'm sorry.
While they're here, I just don't know.
In case any questions for Kenny, he's here.
The capital.
Capital,
Yeah.
oh. I saw that. I didn't have any questions.
okay.
It was one item. It was the $15,000 zero-turn mower. Which sounds very efficient.
It is.
Yeah, I bet. Yeah, no,
I believe we have 2 zero-turn mowers.
yeah.
So we cycle those out 10 years, every 10 years. So we had one purchased in '21. So we anticipate the price is going to go up a little bit, so we have 16,000. So we have 2 full-time cemetery employees, so we have 2 zero-turn mowers.
And those just for cemetery?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any questions? Well, thank you very much for coming. I appreciate that. Kenny and Joanna, thank you very much for coming. All right.
You're not better than bruised.
Not too bad. Thank you.
Hold on for the reserve. We voted for the Finance Committee. We voted for the law. Have a good night.
It's going to be bad timing.
We're having him come. We voted time for the board elections. I'm not sure if there's anything else that we want to, that we need to vote right now. Did we vote on emergency management?
No, I think we,
We're waiting because of the generator?
the generator.
Okay.
Yeah. I gotta have some discussions with our fleet
Okay.
maintenance.
And solid waste, we're waiting until we get a better number. And Department of Inspectional Services, she's going to come in. How about ZBA?
That's under.
Oh, got it, gotcha. And Department of, okay. And the Youth Commission, we could vote on that? Is that department, that's her department?
I think they want to come in,
Okay, gotcha.
because their ask is, we can't even come close, so.
Okay. And I'd like to hold off on the maturing debt and interest until, I'd like to hear what the architects have to say, and I want to hear that presentation. All right, so, any other questions? We have one transfer we can look at. This transfer is requested by the, it's an intra-departmental transfer requested by DDIS, the building department, requesting money from the education account, $500, to go to the education account. So I assume it's 2 education line items.
Yeah, one under code, one under health, they're just transferring.
Oh, code and health, okay. And training needs within the same department, okay. Do I hear a motion to approve?
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. I'm all set. Anything else? Do I hear a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn?
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, okay, great. Thank you.